Welcome to the AI44 Leadership Series, Insights from the C-Suite. And we're joined today by Jaime Klein, Chief HR Officer. Today, we're going to cover four areas. We're going to talk a little bit about sort of general adoption of AI, specifically within the HR, but more sort of generally speaking as well. We're going to talk about some of the challenges that organizations are facing right now in adopting AI. Talk about governance and ethics, which is an incredibly important subject, especially as it relates to sort of the HR function as well. And then we're going to round it out and we're going to talk about the evolving role of HR as it relates to AI and the impact that it's having on that role. Throughout this as well, we're going to add a little case study project that Jamie's been working on with her team that's near and dear to my heart as well. So we're going to talk a little bit about that as well. Jaime, how are you and where do we find you?
I'm good. How are you, Steve?
Very good.
Good. I am in my home office in New Jersey today. Yeah.
Excellent. Excellent. The wonderful world of New Jersey. You and I spent a lot of time in New Jersey.
Yeah, you can't beat Jersey. Everyone gives it a bad rap, but it's one of the best places I've ever lived. So
it's got its places. It's got its places. As long as you close your eyes from the airport to where you are, it's all good.
Yeah, go spend time on the beaches. That's all I have to say. Then
there you go.
A whole different world.
There you go. There you go. So why don't we just dive in? And I thought I would just start with a bit of a warm-up thing before we got into sort of general adoption. I read this crazy stat from Gartner recently. Only 26% of HR leaders operate with an AI-first model. That sort of surprised me, given the fact that HR has such a significant role in, just in the general adoption and behavior change of an organization. But love to hear your thoughts about that. Is that feel about right, or do you have another perspective on that?
I'm not surprised by that stat at all, actually. I've attended a lot of roundtables, talk to peers, not surprised at all. But when we first talked about that stat, I really thought about Katie Couric and Brian Gumbel when they talk about the internet. And they're like, what is the internet? They're trying to show them. I still think we're a little bit in that mode, right? Where it's what exactly is this AI thing? What is its capability? And how are we going to implement it? So, the adoption curve for organizations, whether it's an HR department or an organization as a whole, it's spanning the gamut from people still exploring to people having large scale transformations. I was part of a panel and, one company was talking about how we're having our employees start to dabble. And the other person was talking about, a cultural bot that was going to put all of its communications through to make sure they matched the company culture. So that just shows you where you're at. So the 26% is not surprising to me. I think you're going to see that shift probably in the next year. But not surprising to me.
Yeah, that AI adoption curve you talk about, again, Gartner has come out with recently the gap and how much it's widening from the technology providers. So you can imagine all sort of the large sort of general LLM companies, the OpenAIs, et cetera. The technology is far surpassing what sort of consumer demand is really looking for or how they're using it. I mean, I think most people are still stuck, forget about like the agentic era or agents, they're still stuck using it very much so as an assistant, if that. So I think that gap is very, very real.
It is very real. I have seen some research recently where you actually have seen it go up. The 2026 trends are starting to come out and you're seeing a bigger shift, but yeah.
Oh, interesting. I'd love to talk a little bit more about that later on around where you see it going in 2026 as well, because we are literally at the end of 2025. Okay. So why don't we move into a little bit of sort of kind of general adoption? So maybe just kind of start with a more kind of maybe a simpler type of question around kind of HR specific functions and maybe where you're seeing kind of the most practical examples and where it's really being utilized within the HR function.
Yeah. Again, that example I use, it is all over the place, right? Just earlier, it is big, but I think where you are seeing most organizations go right now in HR departments is that talent acquisition, being able to screen resumes for the right skill sets, candidate summaries, interview preparation, help me with these interview questions, easy stuff that's happening. HR operations and delivery. So this is the bots that are answering the policy questions for you, the benefit questions. I think you're seeing a lot of adoption there because that's relatively easy to do once you do the training. Someone probably won't like that I said it was easy, but it is. You're starting to see some summarizing of data. So people analytics, taking all of your data, giving the data to the bot and asking it to summarize. I think that is getting some traction. And then in the L&D space, I'm seeing content development. I'm seeing learning nudges. These things are all getting traction and they're easy to implement overall. So you're really looking at the fundamentals, right? Where is there administrative tasks? I also think that where HR is that we need to be looking for places that we can find the tasks that can be automated so we can actually put more humans towards the human stuff of human resources. But that's where you're seeing it right now.
It's interesting because you talk about a number of kind of workflows or specific areas across the entire, call it the supply chain that HR manages, which is really interesting. Like, are you seeing, just curious from like a return, are you seeing like your staff coming back and saying like, I'm saving 10 hours a week or I'm saving an hour a week? Are you seeing those kinds of results, or is it still just too haphazard and there's not necessarily those kinds of results you can actually point to?
I'm not seeing those results yet. Some of our tools are in the infancy stages where we're just starting to measure their impact, right? So I would anticipate in 2026, we will have that. I've actually put a goal in place with my team is that we need to find $100,000 of value next year. And that's not about displacing people. I just want to be clear about that. That's about saying, how did we use the AI bot to augment what we were doing, or not necessarily a bot? How did we use AI to augment what we were doing? So that comes with reducing time, right? More time spent over here. So we're still in the definition stage of what that $100,000 value and how we're going to calculate it. But that is like, and that's small, right? It's not like I've asked for $1 million. I'm like, let's start with 100,000 and see what we can do. And I think that's going to start to drive the needle. My team, they raised their eyebrows a little bit, but I was really clear. This isn't about displacing you. This is about, I want this team to use AI to augment what you can do and spend more time with the people doing the HR things that you need to be doing.
Yeah, there's a strong movement around kind of carrot and stick, where you have a lot of organizations, particularly tech-forward organizations. There's been some famous ones over this course of the year. Shopify was one of the ones where they were putting out a very strong statement by the CEO and saying that you cannot be hiring somebody within the organization until you've proven that AI cannot do that role. That's a pretty strong statement. Other organizations that I've been speaking to as well, mainly in sort of the large consulting firms, where their performance reviews are heavily geared or hinged directly to their level of understanding and adoption of AI and usage on a daily basis. So, and this is to the point where you won't have a job in 26 unless you pass certain milestones. So, that's more the stick versus I like where you're going with a little more around the carrot. You're trying to kind of move the organization along in a bit more of a real sort of human way, which is great. I'd be curious, we talked a little bit about some of the stats that Gartner was coming out around sort of this this difference between where the tech companies are actually at in terms of the technology and where it is and where actually sort of consumer behavior and sort of adoption is. But I'd be curious just from your perspective, like, is the AI hype outpacing reality? What's your general perspective about that?
Short answer, yes. But I look back at 2025, and you and I have had so many discussions about AI, but you could, first part of 2025, it was AI. It was like every news article you opened, the Today Show, every time you watched anything, read anything, AI was at the center of it. And the big messages there, especially in the HR world, where it's going to replace all the jobs. When things like the CEO of Spotify came out with, you must do this, you must prove, right? It sent some waves around the HR community because is that really the right thing to do? So I think But then you started to see all of a sudden, August, September, you started to see this, hey, maybe it's not having the impact we thought it was going to have. Maybe we need to rethink this. I actually just had a conversation this morning with one of my colleagues where I had brought up this idea of, should we be looking at AI and how it can augment some of these roles? And his response back to me was, I'm not sure we're getting that yet. So I think there's a lot of hype out there, right? I also think we have to be really careful, right? And I'm going to go back to the Spotify example, and this is my opinion, that we talk about prove to us that the job can't be done by AI, but also look at this and say, is this job replacing any place where is going to replace the ability to make, is it going to make decisions? Is it going to replace judgment? And is it going to take away accountability or give it to a bot, give it to AI? If you're looking in that direction, I think you're on a slippery slope.
Oh, I love that. Yeah, I love that. Yeah, especially the accountability part of it. I just think that that's something that's a very, I think we have general accountability issues, just across the board in organizations,
Yep.
Maybe a little bit in our political system these days as well, which we're not going to go down that rabbit hole.
Nope.
But the reality is the accountability thing is a very human trait that we need to be responsible. We cannot be blaming the bots, so to speak. I think that's something that could get, very, very, as you mentioned, a very dangerous slippery slope. So on that note around kind of the hype and definitely, I agree with you, by the way, it does feel like we were in a saturated environment around AI everything. And it just slowly, as the year went by, other things become obviously more important, i.e. the economy, revenue, things like that with organizations. But I'd be curious to kind of switching and talking a little bit about some of the sort of deeper challenges and maybe how you've overcome some of them as well, because getting your team moving forward on that, trying different things. So what are some of the roadblocks that, like, some of the things that we hear time to time, data fragmentation, getting internal buy-in, getting executive buy-in. Well, executive buy-in actually feels like it's not the problem, but there typically is sort of getting internal buy-in. But anyway, I'd just be curious about what are some of the roadblocks you faced and how you've overcome them.
I think we're still overcoming them. I'm not going to pretend that, I've figured it all out at this point in time. I think there's still things that need to be overcome. But, over the course of 2025, we've heard anything from what's the tool we're going to use, right? There's Copilot, there's Gemini, there's ChatGPT. Which one are we going to use? Who's going to have access to it? There's even conversations around who gets to have access to this tool, right? Does it go to everybody? Does it not go to everybody? Does it need to go to everybody? How is it going to be used? Is it going to be, something as simple as transcripts, right? We do calls, we have a transcript. There's some organizations who are going, you can't do that. That's a liability. That's a risk to us. So I think there's a lot of the challenges and roadblocks are different for each company. Where we were right now with my team, and I'll go to my team. I think my team needed training to start with, right? So it was, and we worked with 2024 on this. We said, where are you at? And where, from your own adoption level, and then what do you need to do? And when we did that prompting training, just teaching people how to prompt, it actually, you could see the wheels start turning, right? Going, oh, I can do that, because they weren't doing it right. They were hitting that roadblock of, well, I keep doing it. I don't get a good output. You teach them how to prompt right. You teach them how to interact with it like a partner. It opens a whole new world for them. So that, I think, making sure people get the training they need to do this, and not walk away from it. It's really easy, like you said, it felt really flashy. We're going to do all this training, but then it's like, oh, where's revenue? Where's headcount? All of those things that, we have a crisis over here. It's really easy to walk away from it. So keeping it top of mind, making sure that they're ideating. But the roadblocks to me were around governance, were around tools, training, because everybody's at a different level, right? And I think people are starting to catch up, but everybody's still at a different level.
Yeah, there was a great thing from, I don't know if you follow, but Section AI. They're great educational company that's very focused around specifically AI and kind of moving the adoption needle. And they came out with a great piece of work around looking at kind of the bottom 80. And a lot of organizations have been focused on sort of the top 20. Like I said before, like leadership teams and executives, particularly the CEOs, they seem to be very bullish around AI because I think they can imagine what it's going to do from either a bottom line or even a top line in terms of growth of an organization, and they can see the opportunities with it. Probably more on an automation than actually fully understanding what generative AI could do. But anyway, that's a different conversation. But they were very focused around in that study around the bottom 80%. If you can get them really using it, I love what you said about just even simple training around prompting, things like that, get them all of a sudden their eyes. Imagine if I could augment my existing workflow just a little bit, like 10%. And then I augment this workflow by 10. All of a sudden you add it all up and you've saved like 20 or 30% of your time during that week. I mean, that's something that becomes like a self-discovery thing versus the organization like trying to cram this new CRM thing down your throat, right?
Yeah.
So
no, you're right.
And I guess that actually kind of brings me to this, especially around things like challenges. I'd just love to hear your perspective on this because one of the things that keeps coming up is the trust factor as it relates to AI. And we just can't trust it. And let's face it, the media, the tech companies themselves have not done themselves any favors with this as well. Like, and we also live in an era too where, trust is in short commodity. Like it's just not something where, just people in general, it's hard to just trust, well, we can barely trust our political leaders, let alone anybody else with it. So, I just love to hear your perspective around building trust. And it can be related to what you guys are doing or just your perspective.
Yeah. I think trust is so fundamental at all of this, right? So, you used political examples, but, when you work best, you work best with people that you trust, right? That they feel like you have their back, right? And so you have to develop that trust with the AI tools as well, right? There is this, again, you couldn't turn on the television without saying it's, this company replaced 4,000 jobs, this company did this, and they were all attributing it back to AI. I'd like to get underneath the hood on that to see if that really was the case. But so I think that you would have to, it's a conversation for another day, but you fundamentally have to build trust with it. So like I did with my team, I tried to take the scary factor out, right? So let's talk about how we use it, open up doors for you, right? Give them an opportunity to explore with it and not in a place that was that you have to do this. It was, hey, explore, come back. What I did was I came back and said, okay, now that I've given you some tools, come tell me how you used it, right? How, and show your colleagues how you used it. That's the most basic level, but it's actually developing the trust with the tool. It's developing the trust with each other that it's okay to try something and it not work right away and learn from it as well. So I think you have to build that trust. I think a big part of building trust is you got to make sure within your team that they know how AI is going to be used and that it's not going to be used to decide. So, and I'm going to use an HR example here. So performance reviews, right? Does it discipline? Even hiring decisions, right? We can use AI in those processes, but at the end of the day, it can never decide the outcome of those processes. It should not, any AI tool that says, I'm going to make a hiring decision for you, personally, I would run. You can't take the human out of the loop, right? Performance management. You can do so many things with performance management. How did I use my performance management this year? I did a voice memo, talked about what I thought was great, did it verbally because I'm a verbal person, went to AI and said, okay, turn this into something I can put into the review, right? That's great. Saves me a ton of time, right? But it wasn't making the decision for me. It was summarizing my ideas, my thoughts, and my experiences. So we have to take that part out of the equation of where does it decide? Where's the human in the loop? And I think those things build trust because if people think you're walking completely away, even with our tool on policies and questions where you ask. We have something, we call it Benny Benny the benefit bot, and they said, oh, so we never get to talk to you anymore. I'm like, no, it's not that you can't call us, it's not that you can't talk to us, but
Interesting.
go here.
Yeah.
Try this first. If you don't get it, and quite honestly, you might get a faster response, because depending on where the human is in their workflow, they might not get to you till 8 hours later. Just try Benny. If you don't like it, call us. So you do have that.
I love that Benny the bot. I love how we so humanize or try to humanize the machine.
Yeah.
And so we don't call it just like, yeah, it's the benefit bot. Like we
Yeah.
actually have to call it Benny. And somehow that's going to make people feel like it's
pronouns.
less.
Yeah, she has pronouns. It is she, her. We decided that. Benny, she, her.
Yeah.
You get to talk to her.
Yeah.
It was we thought we were being really, really funny. But anyway.
Well, I think this kind of brings us to our third kind of area around sort of governance and ethics. And what I mean by that is you touched on, some of the, I would call it sort of maybe guardrails, like areas that you're trying to say, listen, it's never going to replace the human or human decision making. It's really for this purposes. Like you're explaining. Can you talk a little bit about kind of some of the safeguards and some of the guardrails that you're putting in place around that?
So, and I touched on this a little bit, and I'll just touch on it again to reemphasize the point, which is, and somebody else said this, not me, human accountability needs to stay with the human, right? So that's like, you got to have a guardrail like that. Decisions are made by the humans, whatever it is, and that should inform how you look at job design, because in order for AI to be implemented effectively, you really need to look at each role, look at the tasks that are happening today, and look at how you can use AI to augment and automate, right? That's what you need to do. So as you're doing this, you need to be looking and saying, where is the human in the loop? Where do decisions get made that have to be made by the human, right? And make sure that those are incorporated in. I think that's ethically the most thing that we have to do the most, right? Is making sure that human accountability stays with the human, the decision stays with the human, but obviously automate the things that you absolutely can automate, so you can spend more time where you need to spend it. Yeah.
So let's just scratch that accountability thing once again. We talked about this earlier as well, and I think it really is a reoccurring conversation that happens again and again. I know many of the C-suite executives that we're working with, it does come up. And what I mean by accountability too is who's accountable for AI inside of organizations. And typically, in walks the CIO or CTO, and they typically, because it is a technology implementation or there's technology aspects, but I'd love to hear your perspective because, and you and I have had a number of conversations about this around like HR's role in this, but I'd love to hear your perspective around who is accountable. Is there one individual or department or function that should be accountable?
Yeah. I have a funny story about this. I actually asked my husband this same question. He didn't give the answer that I thought he should give, and so we almost, I was like, we might be on the way for divorce. But at the end of the day, it is a collaborative process. I don't think one person or one function owns this. AI, right, is a people issue, right? It's how AI is a people issue. So I think that IT should own the security and infrastructure. Legal needs to look at risk and compliance, and HR needs to look at the people impact. And you are seeing this shift as organizations and senior leadership teams start to realize that implementing AI is about bringing your employees along for the journey. What they're realizing is that HR already has those skills and tools to enable this. And so you've been seeing senior HR executives be elevated to the AI adoption role or AI transformation role. And I think that's right, because it squarely fits in the lane of HR in terms of, we know how to do large scale change. We know how to communicate with intent. We know how to build trust within our teams, right? All the things that we've been talking about in the course of this sits within the skill sets that sit in HR. So every company is doing it differently, but I think any company who is approaching this without having HR or the people function sitting squarely at the top is probably making a mistake.
Wow. And I agree. I think the CEO has a big role in this as well. I don't think the CEO can wash their hands from this as well. And it's interesting. I circle back with a lot of the executive teams after kind of 6 months. We go in, we do some work with them, and then 6 months later, and I'm following up along the way. But most recently, I follow up with a CEO, and my question is usually, at the very beginning of any kind of discussion I have with the executive team, I always ask, where is this in your priorities? And typically AI is always kind of in the sort of top 3, or at least the top 5 in the priorities, and which feels probably about right, the top 5 anyway. This most recent conversation, though, it wasn't even the top 10. And part of it was, you got a sense that the CEO had kind of, I put somebody responsible, was the head of IT. I put a product person on it that was responsible for realizing some, but where are they in terms of the actual adoption within the organization? And they had barely moved the needle 6 months later. So it just fell off the importance of the CEO. And again, as we talked before, the economy, driving revenue, hiring talent, all these things become huge challenges for an organization. So I'm not surprised. And also, I think just the feeling of AI has been overhyped a little bit as well. So, so before we get to our very last question, which is around sort of the evolving role of HR, which I'm dying to hear your answer for that, I thought we would just take a bit of a sidestep and talk specifically about, you have recently started to leverage a new AI platform called Tally, or Ask Tally. So I would just love your perspective on, how are you using it? Maybe first of all, what is it? How are you using it? Is there any specific lessons in terms of implementing a specific application for HR purposes?
So at the core of what Ask Tally is, it is a scientifically based personality profiling company. That is essentially the core of what they do. But what they have done with that is they've integrated AI into the platform. And so what it allows you to do is not just, like any other personality profile, Myers-Briggs, DISC, whatever, pick your poison. It gives you the personality profile. It allows you to look at your teams. But the Ask Tally portion allows you as a leader to start asking it fundamental questions. So we've all experienced this. There's 10 different personalities on a team, right? And that's great because you don't want everybody the same. But some of those personalities are just going to rub, right? And you can't help that. So
that never happens, Jamie.
Never. In my 25 years. Anyway, you can go in and you can ask it. I could go in and saying you and I both have our profiles and we have access to each other's profiles because there are security and things like that go with it. I could go in and say, I need to have a difficult conversation with Steve. Based off of our two personalities, what's the best way for us to approach this? I could also go ask it, I get frustrated by Steve when he does this. How can I mitigate? So it gives you almost real-time coaching, right? To support you. And so it does require, because it's easy to think of it as left to the side, right? So it is going to require, we are still in the implementation stages, but we are using it right now. We've started to use it with a few key roles in terms of bringing in for the personality of a candidate summary as well. It was really interesting. I did this recently with a role I had open reporting to me, and I sat down and went through the personality profile with the candidate that I ended up hiring, so we could be really transparent. Like, this is where we differ, right? This is where we're going to be a good match for each other. So so it wasn't about just me having the power. It was about like, just here it is. This is where we sit. Again, talk about building trust right out of the gate. It was even before they were hired that we had that conversation. So that's what it does. But I think the most powerful piece is the Ask Tally portion of it. You can use it as a coach. You could use it as use it as a coach, use it as a therapist, however you want to think about it. But it does help, right? Along the way. So right now we're in the use case mode. So if I were to say, bringing this in, think about what you want your use cases to be, right? I don't think just go out and say, go do all your personality profiles and here it is, right? We're going a little bit slower to bring it in because we want to get the power of it to hit people so that they talk about it, right? And say, we did this. So that's what we're doing with it. I'm excited about it. I think, I love personality. I love all that org development stuff. And, but that my team loves it too. You know what I mean? And from an HR business partner perspective, we were talking about this. I'm like, we get called into conflict situations all the time, right? And we spend time trying to guess, well, why did this person do that? And what's happening here? And how do we bring them together? This actually just gives you data to say, this is why it's happening. And here are some ways that you might mitigate it. So it's really cool.
Yeah, this whole idea of it sort of in context and always on or always available, I guess. Because I'll tell you, when I first learned about Tally, I was like, the world does not need another personality profiling test. Like, it just does not need it, because I have been through many of these as well. But it's this always on, this Ask Tally capability where you're right, that coach in a box is incredibly invaluable. Like, I can't tell you the amount of times that I'd love to be able to call my coach in a situation to get some advice, but they're just not available. Like, this is just, it's there to give you that, and it knows a lot about both you and the other person, which is, I think, absolutely huge. And by the way, that was a real story, I think, that Jaime was alluding to about Steve in a difficult conversation in difficult situations. But anyway, that's another story for another time. Okay, let's end this off with sort of the evolving role, specifically as HR or within HR, and specifically as it relates to AI.
The evolving role. Like I said, I think HR needs to be at the forefront, not in the back seat of this transformation. We joke, and I hope this is not the case, but we might be going there where we're actually starting to manage bots. And how did that work? What did you and I joke about two bots actually fighting? Hopefully that's not the case down the road. But I think it's going to evolve. I think HR is going to need to continue to iterate with AI in terms of understanding its capabilities, understanding how it's going to impact today and then again tomorrow. Because this is going to, go back to where we started with the internet. The internet has shifted so much since that, them trying to show Katie Couric and Brian Gumbel. So we need to stay there. We need to make sure that we're experimenting. You got to get your teams experimenting on a regular basis. We got to make sure it's really easy, and I think every HR professional has this right now, is that we are being bombarded by try my AI tool, try this one, right?
Yes, yes.
I think HR needs to step back and look at those tools with intent of like, what are you trying to accomplish? Let's not chase the tool. Let's say, what are we trying to accomplish, and be really deliberate around those, what it is, what the problem we're solving for, and how we're going to implement it. Just like I just talked about with Tally overall. And then we have to understand how to evaluate AI outputs critically. So we have to teach people this. We've all heard about the AI bot that hallucinated, right? You go, it gave me the wrong information. My CTO loves to say, it hallucinated, Jaime. I'm like, okay. So, how do we critically look at those outputs? But we have to teach other people to do that, right? It could be really easy if you don't know the subject matter, which is why you need to have the humans in the loop. If you don't know the subject matter expertise in this tool hallucinates on you or doesn't give you the accurate information, you could be going down the wrong path. So, we need to learn how to make sure we're evaluating it critically with our teams and teaching our teams how to do that as well, across the board.
Jamie, this has been an absolute fantastic conversation. We have run the gauntlet, so to speak, in terms of topics as it relates to AI and AI adoption, specifically as it relates to HR. So, really appreciate your time today, and more importantly, your insights. But just to leave you with the last word, is there any one thing that you'd like to leave the audience with?
Great. Well, thanks for having me first, Steve. I've enjoyed the conversation as well. I think we've covered a lot of ground. I don't think there's one thing. I have two things that I would say. First off, you cannot delegate human accountability to a bot. That's the first thing I would say. The second thing I would say, with AI adoption in HR, it's not just about tools. It's about trust, training, and timing. Those are the things that we really need to be looking out for along the way.
Excellent. Well, I have to say, I feel AI is in good hands with C-suite leaders like yourself, that have not just vision, but are also executing with intent. So, Jamie, thank you very much, and look forward to our next conversation.
Me too. Take care.